My cat gave me one of his 7 lives, and showed me my life was worth living. It was a sunny day when my mother abandoned me at the amusement park. I was 3 years old and I still remember the smell of cotton candy and the sound of the carousel spinning. "Wait here for me, sweetheart," she said, pointing to a bench near the Ferris wheel. "I'll be right back." But she never came back. I sat on that bench for hours watching happy families pass by, until a kind police officer approached and asked me where my mommy was. I'm truly grateful to have you here with me today as I share this story. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from so I can understand how far my story has traveled and how far the love of a little orange cat can reach. The early years at the orphanage. Rain drummed against the orphanage windows like tiny fists demanding entry. But inside I, Emma, now 8 years old, sat perfectly still on my narrow bed, watching the other children play. I had learned early that staying invisible was safer than hoping. Hope hurt too much when it was repeatedly crushed by potential parents who chose someone else, someone brighter, someone who smiled more easily. "Emma doesn't talk much," I heard the director telling yet another couple. "She's been here since she was 3 when her mother, well, she just never came back one day." The couple nodded politely and moved on to the bubbly twins who performed cartwheels in the hallway. I still kept the crumpled Ferris wheel ticket in a small box under my bed. It was all I had left from that terrible day. Sometimes, in the darkest nights, I wondered if my mother had ever thought about me, if she had ever regretted that decision. But over the years, I had learned to bury those thoughts deep in my heart, where they couldn't hurt me anymore. The years at the orphanage all blended together. I would wake up at 6:30, eat breakfast in silence, go to school where I was the quiet child in the corner, return for homework and dinner, and then retreat to my bed with my books. Books were my escape. Through the pages I could live different lives, be loved by imaginary parents, have adventures I would never experience in reality. I distinctly remember my 10th birthday. The other children had received visits, gifts, cakes. I sat alone in the common room reading, when the director approached with a small cupcake and a candle. "Make a wish, Emma," she said kindly. I closed my eyes and wished for the same thing I wished for every year, that my mother would come back for me. But even at 10 years old I knew it was an impossible wish. The difficult teenage years. My teenage years were even harder. While other kids started receiving visits from potential foster families, I always remained behind. I was too old, too quiet, too problematic. That's what I heard them saying in the offices when they thought I wasn't listening. At 14, I started working part-time in the orphanage kitchen to earn some money for my books. The cook, Mrs. Martinez, was kind to me. She taught me how to cook, how to knead bread, how to prepare sauces. "You have golden hands, child," she would tell me. "This will serve you well in life." I didn't know how right she was. During those years, I developed a rigid routine that helped me survive emotionally. I would wake up before everyone else to have some moments of solitude, study with maniacal dedication because grades were the only thing I had control over, and every evening I wrote in a diary that I hid under the mattress. I wrote letters to my mother that I would never send, told imaginary families about my days, described what my life would be like after, even though I didn't know what that after meant. At 16, I started asking more concrete questions about my future. What happens when I turn 18? I asked the director. Her expression became sad. "You'll have to make it on your own, Emma. But we'll help you find a job and a place to stay." The prospect both terrified and excited me. Freedom, but at what cost? Leaving the orphanage. My 18th birthday came without fanfare. I packed my bags. Everything I owned fit in a torn backpack and that small box with the amusement park ticket. The director gave me an awkward hug and a check for $500. "It's all we can do," she apologized. "Here are some addresses for cheap boarding houses and these phone numbers are for cleaning jobs." I walked out of the orphanage gate for the last time, and for a moment I stopped to look back. It had been my prison but also my home for 15 years. Now I was completely alone in the world. The first days on the street. The first days of freedom were a nightmare. The cheapest boarding house I could find cost $40 a night. My money would be gone in less than 2 weeks. The owner was a fat, sweaty man who looked at me in a way that made me shudder. The room was small, dirty, and I shared the bathroom with other tenants who screamed at all hours. I desperately looked for work. I went to every store, restaurant, office within miles. But without experience, without references, without even decent clothes for interviews, I was rejected everywhere. "Sorry, we're looking for someone with more experience," was the phrase I heard repeated like a cruel mantra. After a week, the money ran out. The boarding house owner threw me out without mercy. "This isn't a charity," he snarled, throwing my backpack onto the sidewalk. Life on the street. The first nights on the street were the most terrifying of my life. I had always had a bed, even if sparse, always had a roof over my head. Now I was exposed to the elements, to dangers, to the cruelty of the city. I quickly learned the unwritten rules of urban survival. Store doorways were safer than parks. Libraries were refuges during the day. Fast food restrooms were essential for basic hygiene. Dumpsters behind restaurants were sources of food if you could overcome the shame. But hunger was constant, a dull pain that never went away. I lost weight quickly, my clothes became increasingly loose and dirty. My hair, once shiny and well-kept, became dull and tangled. But the worst thing was the invisibility. People walked past me as if I didn't exist, as if I were already a ghost. There were nights when I seriously thought about giving up. Sitting in a dark alley, hungry and cold, I would pull out the old amusement park ticket and wonder if my mother had ever imagined that her decision that day would lead me here. There were moments when the temptation to end it all was almost irresistible. Dangerous encounters. The street doesn't forgive, especially if you're a young woman alone. There were men who approached with offers I knew were traps. "I'll give you a place to sleep," they said with smiles that never reached their eyes. I learned to run fast, to hide well, to trust my instinct when a situation seemed dangerous. One night, a man followed me for 3 blocks. My heart was beating so hard I thought he could hear it. I took refuge in a church that was open all night, where an elderly priest offered me a hot meal and a safe place to sleep. "God sees you, my daughter," he told me. I wasn't religious, but that night I prayed anyway. The cruel winter. Winter was the hardest period. The cold was so intense that sometimes I couldn't feel my toes. I found a night shelter that opened when the temperature dropped below freezing, but it was overcrowded and noisy. Women with addiction problems screamed in their sleep, children cried, and the smell of too many bodies in a small space was suffocating. But it was there that I met Rosa, a woman in her 50s who had ended up on the street after losing her job and being unable to pay rent. "The first rule of the street," she told me, "is never lose hope. The moment you stop believing things can get better is the moment you're truly lost." Rosa became my unofficial mentor. She taught me where to find free meals, which areas to avoid after sunset, how to maintain a minimum of dignity even in the most difficult circumstances. But most importantly, she reminded me that I was still human, that I still deserved respect and love. A hand extended. It was on a particularly gray Tuesday, after almost 8 months on the street, that Marcus first noticed me. I was huddled outside his small cafe trying to warm up in the October cold. I wasn't begging. I never begged. It was one of the few rules I had set for myself to maintain a shred of self-esteem. I just sat quietly with my hands wrapped around a cup of coffee I had bought with my last coins. The cafe was small but cozy, with worn wooden tables and the smell of fresh bread wafting from the kitchen. Through the window, I could see Marcus serving customers with genuine smiles and playful banter. It seemed like the kind of place where people felt at home, a concept that had become abstract to me. "Excuse me," he said gently, stepping outside during a lull in the morning rush. I looked up, surprised. People usually didn't talk to me, let alone with kindness. "I don't mean to intrude, but I've been watching you for a few days. Are you looking for work?" The question caught me completely off guard. I don't have experience in restaurants," I admitted, my voice rusty from disuse and embarrassment. Marcus was about 50, with gray hair at his temples and kind eyes that vaguely reminded me of the priest who had helped me that night. "Experience can be learned," he said with a smile. "I need someone to help with cleaning, maybe some prep work. It's not much, but it includes meals, and I know a small apartment above the bookstore next door. The owner owes me a favor." I couldn't believe it. After months of rejections, someone was offering me not just a job, but also a place to live. "Why?" I managed to ask. Marcus hesitated for a moment, then said, "Because everyone deserves a second chance. And because you remind me of someone I care about very much." The first days at Bella Vista. Working at Bella Vista was like learning to walk again. The first days were clumsy and full of mistakes. I didn't know how the coffee machine worked, I dropped trays, I got confused with orders. But Marcus was patient, incredibly patient. "Don't worry," he would tell me when I apologized for the umpteenth mistake. "Everyone makes mistakes at first. The important thing is to learn." The apartment above the bookstore was tiny. Just a studio with a kitchenette and a bathroom I didn't have to share. But to me it was a palace. I had a bed again, a place to wash myself, a space I could call my own. The first night I stayed awake for hours just looking at the ceiling, incredulous that this was real. Marcus paid me little but enough to survive. And the meals at the cafe meant I could finally eat regularly. Slowly I started to gain weight back, my hair became shiny again, my skin lost that grayish color of malnutrition. Learning to trust again. As the weeks passed, I started to relax a bit. Regular customers began to recognize me. Some greeted me by name. There was Mrs. Anderson, who came every morning for a cappuccino and croissant, and who always told me about her granddaughters. There was Joe, a retiree who read the newspaper at the table by the window and winked at me when I passed by. Marcus never asked intrusive questions about my past, but I felt his protective gaze on me. One day while we were closing the cafe together, he told me, "You know, you have the same eyes as my daughter. The same determination hidden behind fear." "You never talk about your daughter," I observed timidly. Marcus sighed deeply. "We fought when she chose to marry a man I didn't approve of. I was stubborn, she was stubborn. Now it's been 3 years since we've spoken, and I regret it every day." He paused, then added, "Maybe that's why helping you feels so important. It's like having a second chance to do the right thing." Robert's trauma. For several months I started to believe that maybe I could build something that resembled a normal life. I had a job, a home, people who treated me with kindness. But the universe seemed not to have finished testing my resilience. Robert was one of Marcus's old friends and a regular customer at the cafe. A man in his 40s, always well-dressed, with a smile that never quite convinced me. He had always made me uncomfortable. The way his eyes lingered too long on my body, the ambiguous comments he made when Marcus couldn't hear, the times he accidentally touched me when he passed by. It happened on a Thursday evening after closing. I was cleaning tables when Robert offered to help me carry supplies to the storage room. I should have said no, followed my instinct, but I didn't want to seem rude to Marcus's friend. In the narrow storage room, Robert's friendly behavior completely vanished. He positioned himself between me and the door, his smile transforming into something predatory. "You're very pretty, Emma," he said in a voice that made my blood freeze. "And I'm sure you're grateful for everything Marcus has done for you. Maybe it's time to show some gratitude to others too." His hands moved toward me, And in that moment I felt like that 3-year-old child abandoned at the amusement park again, alone, scared with no one to protect me. But this time, something inside me rebelled. I was no longer that helpless child. I screamed with all the strength I had in my lungs. I scratched his face, kicked, bit. Robert staggered backward, surprised by my resistance. "You're crazy," he snarled, touching the scratches on his face. "Nobody will believe you against me." But he was wrong. Marcus came running when he heard my screams, and when he saw the scene, me trembling in the corner, Robert adjusting his clothes with his face scratched, he immediately understood what had happened. "Out," Marcus said in a voice I had never heard from him. "Out of my establishment and never come back." "Marcus, listen, it's not what it seems," Robert began. I said out. Marcus yelled and Robert left quickly. Marcus approached me gently as if I were an injured animal. "Emma, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I didn't see. Didn't understand." He stopped, then added with a broken voice, "Just like I didn't protect my daughter when she needed me." That night I couldn't sleep. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat, every noise made me jump. I felt dirty, violated, even though Robert hadn't actually managed to physically hurt me. But the psychological damage was deep. "A gift with whiskers. I have something for you," Marcus said the next morning, placing a small carrier on the cafe counter. His eyes were swollen as if he too hadn't slept. "I know last night was difficult. And I know you might not trust people so easily for a while. But when you have to take care of something, you start taking care of yourself too." He opened the carrier and out came a small orange tabby cat with bright green eyes and white paws. The kitten looked at me with curiosity but didn't approach. He seemed young, maybe 3 or 4 months old. "I can't take care of a cat," I protested, even though something in my heart was already melting looking at that small creature. "I don't know anything about pets. What if something happens to him? What if I can't take care of him?" "That's exactly why you need him," Marcus said gently. "I learned this the hard way when my wife Rosa wanted to get a dog years ago. At first I was against it, then I understood that taking care of another living being gives you purpose, makes you feel needed. It helps you heal." I looked at the small orange cat who was now cautiously exploring the counter. "How do I know I'll be a good owner?" "The same way I knew you'd be a good employee," Marcus smiled. "Sometimes you have to have faith." The first days with Sunny. I called the cat Sunny because his orange fur reminded me of the sunlight filtering through the cafe windows on clear mornings. But the first days were anything but bright. Sunny seemed as wary as I was. He hid under the bed in my small apartment, only came out to eat when I was at work, and completely ignored me when I tried to approach him. It was as if he could sense my uncertainty, my fear of failing even at this. "Maybe he doesn't like me," I told Marcus after a week of silent coexistence. "Maybe he senses that I don't know what I'm doing." "Cats need time to trust," Marcus replied wisely. "Just like people. You can't force affection, you have to earn it." I started establishing a routine. Every morning before going to work, I prepared Sunny's food and spoke to him gently, even though he remained hidden. I told him about my day that was about to begin, about the customers I would meet, about the things I was learning. I didn't expect a response, but somehow talking out loud made me feel less alone. "Today I learned to make the perfect cappuccino," I would tell him while filling his bowl. "Marcus says I'm improving." And Mrs. Anderson asked how I was doing. I think she really cares. In the evening when I came home, I always found the food finished, but Sunny remained invisible. I started leaving small toys around the apartment, a stuffed mouse, a ball with a bell, hoping to attract his attention. The first connection. The breakthrough came during a stormy night, about 2 weeks after Sunny's arrival. I woke up to a particularly loud thunder and heard a small frightened meow. I turned on the light and saw Sunny huddled at the foot of my bed, visibly trembling with fear. My heart melted. Without thinking, I gently picked him up and placed him on my chest. For a moment I thought he would run away, but instead he curled up against me and started purring, a sound I had never heard from him before. "Don't be afraid," I whispered to him, stroking his soft fur. "I'm scared of storms too. But we're safe here." From that night everything changed. Sunny started following me around the apartment, rubbing his head against my legs when I came home, sleeping next to me every night. It was as if that stormy night had broken an invisible barrier between us. Learning unconditional love. With Sunny in my life, I started changing in ways I had never imagined possible. For the first time, I had someone who depended completely on me. I couldn't afford to sink into depression or self-pity because Sunny needed me. I found myself buying better food, not just for Sunny but also for myself because I had to stay healthy to take care of him. I kept the apartment cleaner because Sunny deserved a nice environment. I came home from work with more enthusiasm because I knew someone was waiting for me, someone who was genuinely happy to see me. Sunny had his little habits that I started to adore. Every morning he would sit on the windowsill and look outside while I prepared breakfast for both of us. When I came home, he greeted me at the door with a meow that seemed to say, "Finally you're back." In the evening, while I watched television or read, he would curl up in my lap and purr so loud that my whole body vibrated. But the most incredible thing was how Sunny seemed to perceive my moods. On days when the weight of my past felt particularly heavy, he would come closer, give me more attention. When nightmares of Robert's attempted assault woke me in the middle of the night, I always found Sunny pressing his warm body against mine, as if he wanted to protect me from the demons in my head. Personal growth. With Sunny by my side, I started seeing myself differently. I was no longer just the abandoned girl, the homeless person, the victim. I was the person Sunny trusted, the one he loved unconditionally. And if such a pure being could love me, maybe I deserved love too. I started taking better care of my appearance. I bought better clothes with my savings, cut my hair regularly, smiled more at the cafe customers. Marcus noticed the change. "You seem happier," he told me one day while we were preparing to close. "More present." "Sunny taught me something," I replied, scratching behind the ears of the cat I had started bringing to work on less busy days. "He taught me that I can be responsible for something precious. That I can be a good mother in a way." Marcus smiled. "That's what happens when you love someone more than yourself. You become the best version of yourself." Marcus's reconciliation with his daughter. It was precisely by observing my relationship with Sunny that Marcus found the courage to call his daughter after 3 years of silence. One evening, while we were closing the cafe together, he told me, "Seeing how you take care of Sunny, how love has changed you, I understood that I'm wasting precious time with my daughter. Pride is a stupid thing when it comes to family." "What will you tell her?" I asked. "The truth. That I miss her. That I was a fool. That I want to know my son-in-law and be part of their lives." He paused, then added, "And I'll tell her about you. About how you reminded me what it means to be a father." When Marcus finally managed to reconcile with his daughter, it was one of the happiest moments I had ever experienced. Seeing the joy in his eyes made me understand that sometimes second chances come when you least expect them, and that love has the power to heal even the deepest wounds. The storm that changed everything. Almost 8 months had passed since Sunny had entered my life, and I had started to believe that maybe finally I had found my peace. But fate still had one more card to play. It was a Tuesday evening in November when the most violent storm I had ever seen arrived. The wind howled like a wounded animal. The rain beat against the windows with a force that made the whole building shake. Sunny was nervous, pacing back and forth around the apartment, meowing and looking toward the door. "It's okay, buddy," I tried to reassure him, but I was nervous too. Storms always brought me back to that night at the orphanage when I was 8 years old, when I hid under the covers praying for it to end. A particularly loud thunder shook the entire building, and in that moment the unthinkable happened. The apartment door, which I thought I had closed properly, swung open. Perhaps the old building structure had shifted in the wind, or maybe I hadn't closed it correctly in my distraction. In an instant, Sonny ran out into the stormy darkness. "Sonny!" I screamed, but he had already disappeared down the stairs. My heart stopped. The thought of losing Sonny, of failing the only living being who had ever depended completely on me, was unbearable. He was more than a cat to me. He was proof that I could love and be loved, that I could take care of someone. Without stopping to grab a proper coat, I ran down the stairs and out into the storm, wearing only my house clothes and a thin sweater. The desperate chase. The streets were almost deserted, flooded with several inches of water, and visibility was practically zero. The rain was so heavy it blinded me, the wind so powerful I had to fight to stay upright. But I couldn't stop. Sonny was out there, scared and alone, and I had to find him. "Sonny! Sonny!" I screamed his name until my throat was raw, checking every alley, every doorway, every possible hiding place. My clothes were completely soaked within minutes, my hair plastered to my face, my shoes squelching with each step in the water flooding the streets. I thought about all the times Sonny had comforted me in difficult moments, about how he had taught me to love again. I couldn't lose him. I couldn't fail the only being who had ever given me unconditional love. I had almost lost hope, was soaked to the bone and starting to shiver from the cold when I finally saw him. A small orange shape in the middle of the street, paralyzed with fear as car headlights approached through the torrential rain. The moment that changed my life. Time seemed to slow down as I realized what was about to happen. Sonny was directly in the path of an oncoming car, and the driver clearly couldn't see him through the storm. In that moment, I didn't think about the consequences, didn't think about the danger. I only thought that I couldn't lose the only being who truly loved me. I ran into the middle of the street without hesitation. I grabbed Sonny in my arms just as I heard the screech of the car's brakes sliding on the wet asphalt. The vehicle stopped just a few feet from where I stood, my heart beating so hard I could hear it over the noise of the storm. Sonny trembled in my arms, wet and scared but alive. I pressed him against my chest, whispering words of comfort while I too trembled, not just from the cold but from the realization of what had just happened. The driver's door opened immediately and a man in his early 30s jumped out, his face pale with shock. "Are you insane?" he initially yelled, then immediately softened his tone when he saw me holding the trembling cat. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say. Are you okay? Is the cat okay?" I looked at him through the rain that continued to fall. He was tall, with dark hair that was now wet and plastered to his forehead, and brown eyes full of genuine concern. He's my cat," I managed to say through chattering teeth. He got scared by the storm. The man looked at my completely soaked clothes and my trembling form holding Sonny. "You'll get hypothermia if you stay out here. There's a 24-hour diner 2 blocks away. Let me buy you some coffee to make sure you're both okay." The decision to trust. Every instinct I had developed over the years to protect myself screamed at me to say no, to go home, not to trust this stranger. After what had happened with Robert, my trust in men was practically non-existent. But something about this stranger's genuine concern, and perhaps the adrenaline from the near accident, made me hesitate. I looked at Sonny, who had now calmed down in my arms but continued to tremble. I too was shaking violently and I knew he was right. I needed to warm up or I really risked hypothermia. "Okay," I finally said, my voice almost inaudible over the noise of the storm. "But just for a quick coffee." The man smiled. a smile that seemed sincere without that falseness I had learned to recognize. Perfect. My car is here, I can give you a ride. I prefer to walk, I replied quickly. The idea of getting in a car with a stranger was still too scary. I understand, he said without insisting, and this made me relax slightly. Let's walk together then. The diner and first conversations. The diner was a small family place, warm and bright, a sharp contrast to the storm that continued to rage outside. I sat in a corner, Sunny wrapped in my sweater and purring contentedly in my lap, while the stranger, who had introduced himself as David, returned with 2 steaming cups of coffee and a plate of toast. I'm really sorry about earlier, David said, settling into the seat across from me. I couldn't see anything in that rain. When I saw you run into the street. He visibly shuddered. I've never been so scared in my life. It wasn't your fault, I replied quietly, still wary but struck by his sincerity. I shouldn't have run out like that. But I couldn't let anything happen to him. David looked at Sunny, who had now fallen asleep in the warmth of my sweater. What's his name? Sunny. It's perfect for him, David smiled. He's lucky to have someone who loves him enough to risk their life to save him. Those words struck me deeply. No one had ever said that Sunny was lucky to have me. Usually I thought the opposite, that I was the lucky one to have him. Discovering David. While we drank the hot coffee and the storm gradually calmed outside, David started telling me about himself. He was an elementary school teacher, 28 years old, and had moved to the city 2 years earlier for a new job after living his whole life in a small mountain town. The kids keep me busy, he said with a genuine smile. I teach 3rd grade and they're all so full of energy and curiosity. Every day is an adventure. Do you like teaching? I asked, surprising myself with my interest. I love teaching. Especially the kids who need more attention, those who come from difficult situations. I think everyone deserves someone who believes in them. Something in his words resonated deeply inside me. Maybe it was the way he talked about difficult children, or maybe it was simply the genuine kindness in his voice, but I started to relax slightly. David asked me questions about Sunny, about how I had found him, about how long we had lived together. He didn't ask personal questions about my life or my past, which I enormously appreciated. He seemed to instinctively understand that there were delicate topics to avoid. The beginning of something new. That first conversation lasted more than an hour. When the storm finally calmed enough to allow us to go out, David insisted on walking me home to make sure I arrived safely. Thank you, I said when we reached my building. For the coffee, for everything. It was my pleasure, David replied. And I'm really glad you and Sunny are okay. He paused for a moment, then added, I know this might seem strange, but would you like to have coffee again? Maybe when there's no storm and when we haven't just avoided a car accident. My first reaction was to say no. It was too soon, too scary, too risky to open up to someone new. But I looked at Sunny, who had lifted his head and was staring at David with curiosity, and something inside me softened. Maybe, I finally said. But slowly. I've had difficult experiences with people. David nodded understandingly. Slowly is perfectly fine. How about next Tuesday? Same diner, same time. Okay, I replied, surprising myself with my answer. The following Tuesday, David showed up punctually at the diner. I brought Sunny with me. He had become my inseparable companion and my source of comfort in new situations. David didn't seem surprised to see him. In fact, he bought cat treats that he had brought specifically. I thought Sunny might enjoy these, he said, offering a treat to my cat. Sunny sniffed it cautiously, then ate it enthusiastically. It was as if he too was starting to trust David. Our weekly conversations gradually became deeper. David told me about his childhood in the mountains, about his parents who ran a small bed and breakfast, about his dreams of making a difference in children's lives. I slowly started sharing small pieces of my story. Not the traumatic details, but enough to make him understand that my life hadn't been easy. "Do you work at Bella Vista?" he asked one evening. "Yes, Marcus gave me a chance when I really needed it," I replied. "He sounds like a good person. He's the best person I've ever known. He and Sonny saved my life in different ways." David didn't ask other questions, but I saw understanding in his eyes. It was as if he understood that there was a bigger story behind my words, but respected my need to share it at my own pace. The gradual opening up. As the weeks passed, I started looking forward to our Tuesday meetings. David was different from any man I had ever known. Patient, kind, never intrusive. He never tried to touch me or get too close, respected my spaces and my timing. One evening, after about 2 months of weekly meetings, David asked me if I wanted to see where he worked. "There's a children's play on Thursday evening," he said. "Nothing formal, just parents and some friends. But if you'd like to come." The idea of meeting other people scared me, but there was something about David's enthusiasm for his work that intrigued me. "Can I bring Sonny?" I asked. David laughed. "I don't think the principal would approve of a cat in the auditorium. But maybe Sonny can wait for you at home this time." It was the first time I left Sonny alone for a social outing. I was nervous but also excited. Seeing David with his students was a revelation. He was natural with them, patient but firm, and the children clearly adored him. During the play, I noticed how he paid particular attention to a shy girl who had forgotten her lines, encouraging her with reassuring smiles and gestures. "That's Sophie," he explained after the show. "Her parents recently divorced and she's going through a difficult time. But she's improving." The way he worried about that child made me understand something important about David. He wasn't just kind to me, he was genuinely a good person who cared about others. The evolution of feeling. After 4 months of weekly meetings, I started to realize that my feelings for David were changing. He was no longer just the kind stranger who had helped me during the storm. He was becoming someone important in my life. But with this realization also came fear. What happened if David discovered the whole truth about my past? What happened if he got tired of my caution, my limits, my fears? What happened if he abandoned me like everyone else had? One evening, while I was petting Sonny on my bed, I confessed my fears to him. "I don't know what to do, Sonny. I think I'm falling in love with David, but I'm so scared. What if I'm not enough for him? What if I'm too broken to be loved?" Sonny looked at me with his wise green eyes and started purring louder. It was as if he was saying, "You learned to love me, you learned to trust me. Maybe it's time to trust again." The first kiss. It was during our 6th month of meetings that David finally asked if he could kiss me. We were sitting in the small park near the diner, watching the sunset. Sonny was with us, sleeping in his small carrier. "Emma," David said softly, "can I ask you something?" I nodded, my heart starting to beat faster. "I really like you. More than I've ever felt for anyone. And I wonder if you feel something for me too." The words got stuck in my throat. I wanted to say yes, I wanted to tell him that I felt something too, but fear paralyzed me. David must have seen the struggle in my eyes because he quickly added, "You don't have to answer now. And you don't have to do anything you don't feel like doing. But I wanted you to know how I feel." "I feel something too," I finally whispered. "But I'm scared." "What are you scared of?" "Everything. Of being abandoned again. Of not being enough. Of being too broken to be truly loved." David moved slightly closer but stopped when he saw me stiffen. "Emma, I don't know what happened to you in the past, but I know you're one of the strongest and bravest people I've ever known. And I know you deserve to be loved." When he finally kissed me, it was sweet and respectful, and for the first time in years I felt safe in someone's arms. The deepening of the relationship. In the following months, my relationship with David deepened slowly but steadily. He was incredibly patient with my limits, never pressured me for more than I was ready to give. He started coming to my apartment for simple dinners, where he, Sunny, and I spent quiet evenings watching movies or just talking. Sunny adored David. It was as if my cat had given his official approval to this new man in our lives. David always brought small gifts for Sunny, new toys, special treats, or simply lots of attention and cuddles. "I think Sunny loves me more than you do," David joked one evening while my cat purred loudly in his lap. "It's possible," I replied, laughing. "He's always had a weakness for kind men." It was at that moment that David looked at me with a serious expression. "Emma, can I ask you something personal?" My body automatically stiffened. "It depends on what." "You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but what happened to you? What made you so scared of men?" For a long moment I remained silent. Then, looking at Sunny, who was purring contentedly between us, I found the courage to tell my story. Not everything, not yet, but enough for David to understand where my fear came from. I told him about the abandonment at the amusement park, about the years at the orphanage, about life on the street, about Robert's assault. David listened without interrupting, without judging, without trying to minimize my pain. "I'm sorry," he finally said, his voice broken with emotion. "I'm sorry you had to go through all that. But I'm also incredibly proud of you for surviving, for building this life, for learning to love again." The proposal. 8 months after our first stormy meeting, David proposed to me. It wasn't grand or theatrical. It was perfect for us. We were in my apartment, David, Sunny, and I were watching a movie when David paused it and turned to me. "Emma," he said, taking my hands in his. "These months with you have been the happiest of my life. You and Sunny have filled my heart in ways I didn't know were possible." My heart started beating fast. "David." "Wait, let me finish," he said gently. "I know marriage might seem scary to you. I know the idea of promising forever to someone might bring back your fears of abandonment. But I want you to know that I'm not like the people who hurt you. I will never leave you." He pulled out a small velvet box. This was my grandmother's. "It's not much, but it means something to me, and I hope it can mean something to you too." The ring was simple but beautiful, a small stone surrounded by tiny diamonds. "Emma, will you marry me? Will you let me be part of your family? Will you let me love you and Sunny for the rest of my life?" I looked at David, then looked at Sunny, who was staring at us with his wise green eyes, as if he too was waiting for my answer. In that moment, all my fears seemed to melt away. This was true love, patient, kind, safe. "Yes," I whispered through happy tears. "Yes, I'll marry you." Sunny chose that moment to start purring louder than I had ever heard, as if he too was happy with my decision. The wedding. Our wedding was small but perfect. Marcus and his wife Rosa served as witnesses. Marcus was so proud he cried throughout the entire ceremony. We had arranged for Sunny to be part of the ceremony, wearing a small bow tie and carrying the rings down the aisle in a basket attached to his collar. "Only you could convince me to have a cat as ring bearer," David joked the morning of the wedding. "Sunny is family," I replied. "We couldn't get married without him." The ceremony was held in the small garden behind Bella Vista Cafe. It was simple but full of love. When the officiant asked if anyone had objections, Sunny meowed loudly, making everyone laugh. "I think he's giving his approval," the officiant said, smiling. During the vows, I looked into David's eyes and said, "You taught me that love doesn't just mean being loved, but also being worthy of love. You showed me that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about the people who choose to love you, and the little orange cats who teach you that your life is worth living. The new life. After the wedding, we moved to a larger apartment that could comfortably accommodate 2 people and 1 very spoiled cat. Sonny adapted immediately to the change, as if he had always known this was his definitive family. David proved to be not only a wonderful husband, but also an exceptional cat dad. Sonny adored him, and I often found them asleep together on the couch. Sonny curled up on David's chest while both purred. Well, at least Sonny purred. David just breathed contentedly. Marcus was so happy about our marriage that he gave us a honeymoon, a week at a small mountain in that accepted pets. It was my first vacation ever, and I spent it with the 2 creatures I loved most in the world. Reconciliation with the past. A year after the wedding, David proposed that we go together to the amusement park where I had been abandoned. The idea initially terrified me, but he assured me we would only go if I felt ready. You don't have to confront the past to be happy in the present, he told me. But sometimes returning to a place that once hurt you when you're surrounded by love can help you close that chapter definitively. We decided to go on a sunny day just like that day 30 years earlier. We brought Sonny in his carrier, and David held my hand as we walked among the rides. The bench where my mother had left me was still there. I sat there with David and Sonny, and for the first time in all those years I didn't feel pain when I thought about that day. I felt only gratitude for the journey that had taken me from that scared child to the loved woman I had become. "Thank you, Mom," I whispered to the wind. "I know you were young and scared. I know you thought you were doing the right thing. And in a way you did. Because that day started the journey that brought me here, to this family, to this love." Sonny's legacy. As I write this story, Sonny is now 10 years old, a distinguished senior cat with some gray fur around his muzzle, but with the same wise green eyes that won my heart that first day. He's still the center of our family, still my most faithful companion, still the one who teaches me every day what it means to love unconditionally. David and I have talked about having children, and the idea doesn't scare me like it once did. If Sonny taught me anything, it's that I have the capacity to love, protect, and nurture another living being. And if we should have children, I know Sonny will be the best big brother they could want. Marcus has become like a father to me, and his reconciliation with his daughter has also brought her into our extended family. Rosa, Marcus's wife, has taught me to cook traditional recipes, and we often gather for Sunday dinners where Sonny reigns supreme, receiving treats from every table. The gift revealed. When people ask me the secret to my happiness, I always tell Sonny's story. "My cat really did give me one of his 7 lives," I always say. The old Emma, the one who was afraid to trust, afraid to hope, afraid to love, died that night in the storm. And this new life is everything I never dared dream I could have. But the truth is even deeper than that. Sonny didn't just give me a new life. He taught me that I had always had the power to love and be loved. It had always been inside me, buried under years of pain and fear, but always there. Sonny simply taught me how to dig deep enough to find it. He taught me that love doesn't always come in the form you expect. Sometimes it comes with whiskers and demands breakfast at 5 a.m. Sometimes it comes during a storm, when you run to save something precious and end up saving yourself. Sometimes it comes through the kindness of a stranger who sees value in you when you can't see it in yourself. The epilogue of gratitude. Today, as Sonny sleeps in the sun on the windowsill of our house, David corrects his students' homework at the kitchen table, and I prepare dinner for our small family, I often stop to reflect on how incredible this journey has been. From a child abandoned at an amusement park to a woman who learned to love and be loved. It was a long and difficult road, full of pain and fear, but also incredible discoveries and unexpected joy. And it all started with a small orange cat who taught me that when you stop being afraid to love, the universe fills you with more love than you ever dreamed you deserved. Sonny gave me one of his 7 lives, it's true. But in return I gave him the best home a cat could want, and he gave me the family I had always dreamed of. Sometimes when Sunny looks at me with those wise green eyes, I swear he smiles. As if he knows exactly what he did, as if he planned it all from the beginning. As if he always knew we were destined to save each other. And maybe in a way he really did know.